Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dynamic Character Productions' final weekly recap of our fifth mini-season, Trinity Falls. I'm your host, Jon Millsip, coming at you for the last time this season, but I am joined by two phenomenal guests. We couldn't have the finale recap without two of our finalists from Sahara Dunes and two current production members. I am joined by the wonderful Kylie Scruggs and the fantastic Erik Barnes. Kylie, Erik, how are you guys doing today?
So good, Jon. It's so fun to be here. It's weird that it's already over, but thanks for having us.
It is so weird. Yeah, very honored to be here watching this amazing cast and this really fun season.
I'd rather be playing, probably, but this is a secondary, good option.
Well, let's just dive right in it. We have two fantastic episodes closing out this season. And in episode 9, we started with Sean just recapping the last round. We're coming off of that 3-minute scramble where Emily throws out Lex's name. And Lex kind of hoes and hums about giving his name of his own. Votes everywhere. And Jon is just happy he didn't have to talk during that round at all. He felt like he might be pressured to because, sometimes in those separate rounds, people don't talk much. They kind of keep their cards close to their chest. But that also agitated him a bit because Sarah and Vee didn't say who they were voting for, so he didn't know where the votes were going. And that's why he ends up voting for Sarah in that round. Mm-hmm. Just to avoid going to rocks. Now, Kylie, what if somebody else had this same idea, put it on Sarah or even him, and then we still had a 2-2 tie? You're still going to rocks here.
Yeah, I think that would have been interesting. I mean, honestly, I like the idea though, because Erik will probably have thoughts on this. He absolutely hates when people go to rocks or have something that they can do to, prohibit them from going to rocks. So I imagine you probably have thoughts on Jon doing it, but I think it would have been kind of interesting because this season so far, we've seen Lydia have so many idols. It's so hard to know what to do. So anything that you can do to just try to mitigate that option, I respect. And I think that was a good move. But also it's Sarah is his number one at that point. And they're so close. I understand it, but also it's at what cost? Does that actually make sense? So it was interesting for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it was, I had mad respect that he had the foresight to think through it that way. I think it was ultimately the right call, but definitely risky. I feel like in a past season, Iriki, somebody did something very similar and then got themselves voted out. So definitely a risk, but he made the right call. I think it was a smart move.
Yeah, I think he was definitely safer knowing that there were two names out there with Lex and Lydia's names out there. But I definitely understand this concern that, maybe because there were two names and it just splits 3-3. I just don't think he thought even further ahead as to there are two people who I don't know where they're voting. They might not be voting for either of these two people discussed. Yep. And it could have made a stickier situation.
Yep, agreed.
The other thing Jon tells us, which is a little baffling here, he says he wants to bring Emily to the end at this point. Mm-hmm. He admits that Emily's playing a fantastic game. He says that it might be hard to beat her. But of all those options, he really wants to bring Emily to the end. Erik, how are you feeling about that? Oh, Kylie, go
Hold on, I have a thought. Yeah, well, the only reason I want to jump in is because it's with Jon, at this point, I think he thinks he has this game in the bag. I don't feel like he cares who he brings to the end. And him and Emily's story has been really interesting. I loved the part when Emily was he's my org crush. He's so cute. And then I found out he's gay. I think that's so funny because that's something I would totally do too. But I just thought it was really interesting, the way that they made it to the end. And then he was oh yeah, I want Emily to go. And then obviously this vote, or I want her to go with me, not go. And I think this vote is so interesting because I think there is a confessional at some point where Jon essentially says he thinks that he will win no matter what. So it just sets up the next rest of this episode and the next episode really, really well. So I just wanted to point that out on the front end. Because I do think he's playing a great game, but also I think that is coming into play when he's saying that he would take him to the end.
100%. No, I think you just hit the nail on the head because at first I was is this an emotional thing. Like he just feels close to her. I think they played a game in the past, or they mentioned something along those lines. So I'm like, maybe he just has respect for her and he wants to be there with her at the end because he just really loves her. But no, I think you're right. You can tell in the confessionals, he's feeling kind of like on top of the world. Like he thinks he definitely has it in the bag. So I think it's just like, well, I think I could beat anyone. So I might as well bring the person that I enjoy the most or something like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting considering just when we do finally get to the finale and we kind of get to Final Tribal Council and people are talking about the configuration we get at Final Tribal Council and how that's kind of the one that they weren't really sure where they were going. It really goes to show that the respect Jon was getting in game from a lot of people was not reflected by the jury.
Yep.
So then Sarah tells us, great on Emily throwing out a name there. Why didn't Lex do it? Because, Sarah gave Lex 2 opportunities to do it. We talked about it last week. Sarah, a little frustrated. Lex wasn't willing to put out a name, so she knew how to vote with it. Lydia wanted more time. She wanted to kind of set up the idol, play more. Felt like she didn't know if she needed to play the idol here, but it was a safer thing to do. But she really wishes she had the idol for this last final 5 round. And then Emily was worried that the votes would have been Jon or Lydia if she didn't say Lex's name, which kind of gives that justification as to why she became a little more aggressive there, why she said Lex's name in the first place. Because previous votes had been Lydia, Jon, Lydia, Jon, Lydia, Jon. So she felt if she said Lex's name, she could get her target out and then kind of worry about the consequences afterwards.
I loved that so much. Just Emily just going for it. Like, it was so bold. It was so exciting to watch. Like, she's truly one of the most dynamic, I know, pun intended, characters on like any of these seasons. Like, she was just a joy to watch. But yeah, I think it was very smart to put the name out there because when you're in those like last minute situations and you really can't go scramble, like somebody needs to say something. I know in our season we were like skirting around it. We weren't actually putting the name out there, but we were referencing past conversations. So I'll be interested to learn, or maybe he's answered it already, why Lex didn't put a name out, because this is like do or die. Like this is all you have left. You have to say something. If you don't, then what's gonna happen? Yeah.
I know that was like the episode before, but like I'm glad that we could talk about it just like real quickly because we did have a situation like that in our season, and it was interesting. Like with Victoria when she went that round, like she was the one that kind of like you said, we skirted around the idea, and she was the one that was kind of like throwing names out, and she still ended up going. So it's interesting the dichotomy here with like Lex like not knowing what to do, and Emily saying like, okay, this is a name, and then he went. But then the next round, Emily obviously like, had a bit of a target on her back from that, which obviously there's more of a target. It's not just that move, but like it did carry over, which is interesting because it's always different depending on how you go about that. It's a similar move, but kind of like the way that you do it has different repercussions.
Absolutely. That brings us into our immunity challenge. And this one's a bit of a doozy. This one's called color coded or color coordinated, sorry. This is a 6-room obstacle course, essentially, harkening back to Survivor's massive Final 5, Final 4 challenges back in the day. Castaways will need to complete 6 different tasks in 6 separate breakout rooms. After they complete each task, they'll receive a color from each of the rooms. They have to then go back to the main room, provide that color to the hosts, and then after they've collected all the colors from all these rooms, the colors named letters are capitalized in specific ways. They'll take those letters, they will unscramble a code phrase, and the first person to do that wins immunity. And a reward from Joshua Spitzer, the lovely mastermind behind our season logos, and of Outcast Originals on Etsy.
The best logos.
The best logos, absolutely.
So good.
I'm obsessed with this logo, by the way.
It is
having to say it all season.
Yeah, absolutely. Joshua creates beautiful images for us, and he outdid himself with Trinity Falls.
Yep.
It's so professional. He's so talented.
So we have these 6 rooms. Let's break them down here. So the first room is flip and flip and flip. it's a DCP staple at this point. It's Extreme Flip Cup, getting more extreme. So what'll have to happen is we have Flip Cup. So, you put the cup on the edge of your table, you flip it over, try to land it face down. Then you flip another cup on top of that, and then you flip another cup on top of that. We have Stack and Snitch, which the Castaways have to take a upside down solo cup, stack 3 dice vertically on it, then throw the dice up in the air and catch them all in the cup. We have Build and Bounce, where they have to build 2 3-cup pyramids with the top cup facing up, and then they had to bounce a ping pong ball off their surface into the cup, into each of the cups on the pyramids. We had Flip and Sip, where they had to flip 2 straws into individual solo cups. We had Hide and Seek, which is just an online maze.
That was our room.
That was our room.
And we have Review and Recall, which
Was your room.
survivors were shown a 5-card sequence, which they had to memorize. After they had looked at the sequence, the sequence would go away. They had to flip 5 cards face up using only their finger on the edge of their table. And once they had done that, they had to find the cards, show them one at a time to repeat the sequence back in order to earn their color.
So hard.
Yes.
Not easy.
That one
so
literally
difficult.
so difficult. I like when we tested these, and
Yeah.
I was gonna win this whole round until I got to John's room, and I was there for 15 minutes. It's literally so hard.
I don't know
So I
how
don't
they
give
did
you
it
that
so
all.
quickly. I had
They
the
killed it.
most
They're so-
trouble with that one when we tested it. And I feel like these Castaways had more difficulty in the maze, which is just hilarious. And they flew through the recall one, which was so difficult. So
They're smart.
Remember, during testing, so we spent a lot of time testing our challenges, trying to fine-tune them to make sure that they work, that they're not too difficult, but they're still difficult enough to provide some challenge. Originally, Review and Recall had the contestants flipping 10 cards rather than 5 cards when we were in testing. And we just found that was too much because people forgot that sequence really fast at that point. And even with 5 cards, it looked in the episode like they were kind of flying through this. They weren't. It took them all about 3 to 5 minutes in the rooms on the day of. And I don't think a single one of them actually got it on the first attempt day of. But anyways, all of these rooms, the contestants, there's only 5 contestants left. There's 6 rooms. They are randomly put in the starting room without Review and Recall. We knew as production that Review and Recall would kind of be the one that held people up a bit. So we didn't want to give anyone an unfair advantage by having them start there. Yeah, Erik, what are your thoughts on this? What type of strategy would you approach this challenge with?
What type of strategy? I guess I would just try to get to whatever empty room I can as quickly as I can. I think it was so unfortunate when Sarah Sarah was waiting patiently to get into the room, and then somehow Vee got there before her. Even with Vee's technical difficulties she was having, she still got there before her. And I think they were all neck and neck before that. So I feel the only thing strategically that I can think of for this challenge to do would be just make sure you don't get hold up in that situation.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is one of those things, and I think there's a point actually where Sarah says she's waiting for specific rooms, and then 3 people come in, and one of them was from the room she was waiting to go to, and she didn't just go to it right away. So you have to be really quick on the draw. Yeah. And then also, I'm really glad you brought up these technical issues, because this isn't something that's really shown in the episode, but kind of hinted at in the episode. Every time we see Vee in the main room, we see the host ask, okay, where do you want to go next? This is because something was up with Vee's Zoom where she couldn't go to a breakout room if she wasn't specifically assigned to it to start. So every time she came back to the main meeting, the host had to assign her to the breakout room she was going to go to. So she kind of had this disadvantage in this challenge because she was at the mercy of timing like that. Yes, Alex and McKenna did a fantastic job of assigning her to rooms very quickly, so quickly that Sarah couldn't get to the room before Vee did. But that's where all that talk was coming from. And let's break down how the challenge went a little bit here. We see people struggling at first, and that was kind of how we anticipated. None of these challenges were like, except like maybe the maze, were those type of things where someone would be like, okay, I know exactly how to handle this. I can do it really easily. But like you two said, you guys were in the maze. Kylie, what was going on there? Because we saw people struggle. Okay,
the maze is so funny. Yeah, I mean, some people got it. I don't remember exactly who did it really fast, like maybe Sarah. Emily, though, like my favorite part of this whole challenge was when Emily was in the maze room with us because she had so many technical difficulties. I think that she was playing on like an iPad or something. So she like got a call in the middle of it, and then like she couldn't figure out the maze, and it was just so funny. Like me and Erik were dying, but she got through and like did really well. But the maze is just interesting because it's like you can easily get on the first try if you see it, but if you don't, then you get so hung up. So they were like half the people like got it pretty fast, and then like half like literally were like stuck there for a long time. So there was really no rhyme or reason. But it's interesting because that room like could either be like one that you just zip in and zip out, or you're there for a long time. So I really enjoyed watching it because the maze is hard, you know, like it's not an easy thing, but also like in comparison to Flip Cup or like the straw one, it's like that if you don't have the touch, like you could just get stuck there for a long time too. So it is interesting like how some people are better at them than others, and there's no like actual skill there. It's just like if you're good at them or not, and you don't know till you try them.
They were struggling though, and it was so funny. Like, I mean, I was rooting for all of them because they're just all so likable and rootable. But like, they all were taking the exact wrong route. Like from the beginning. Then they're all like freaking out. Like, oh my gosh, can I backtrack? Am I allowed to backtrack? What do I do? Do I have to start over? They're like panicking. It was so funny.
Because you have the time constraint too, and it's like you don't know who's been there yet, and you don't know how fast everyone else was. So you just like want to do it as fast as possible, and then you just like get so stressed because there's so much pressure.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned like having the touching stuff and helping with there, because even right after this challenge, Lydia says she got hung up on the Flip Cup because you know she didn't have that side of a college experience that much, and
would have been horrible at it.
Yeah, right. Like it's those little things. It's your experience coming in. We even saw with the build and bounce. It was incredibly hard to bounce your ball into that cup and not have that cup fall over. Now, luckily, that still counted as long as the ball stayed in the cup. So a lot of people were still able to do it. But even something simple, like I feel like stack and snatch feels like a really simple thing. But we see a few people struggle with that too, right? Where they throw it up and they'll catch like two of the dice and one of them just falls down. This challenge has so many different facets to it that you really need to think through and figure out. I think what it really came down to is whoever figured out that getting to review and recall before their last room was flying through this challenge a lot more, because review and recall was just the one that people could get hung up on. And it just was the one that was taking people the longest. But eventually we see everyone rushing into that main room, giving colors left and right. And then Jon comes in, he gives the 6th color, and he solves the word safety, winning immunity. Jon's now immune, someone who has been a target for the last couple of weeks. Hours, day of, weeks in episodes. And I mean, it's a big name to take off the table at this point. And he tells us that. He's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I needed immunity here. And he gives us some of his previous org experience where he's kind of been the 4th a lot in his org experience.
Always rough goddess.
Yeah. So he's hoping that's not the case this time. And he believes that, and again, he reiterates here that he believes Emily's his greatest competitor, but he still wants to go to the end with her, which is really interesting. It's this really loyal game that he's playing here. And I guess he's thinking that way when he gets to the jury too. It was like, but I was even loyal. I kept my closest ally in the entire time.
It's very interesting because, like, I feel from the beginning, at least in his confessionals and like the way he wanted to approach the game was very like devious, strategic, like, but then he ends up playing like he really isn't lying that much or at all. Like, and admits in a confessional, he's like, if I do lie, this might be the first time I'm actually lying, which is just, it doesn't go hand in hand with like his persona in the game. But I think it's a really interesting outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we have like, you know, general challenge talk. Sarah's talking about not getting to Flip Cup and having her Flip Cup skills be shown on YouTube. I'm actually pretty sure Flip Cup was the room that she was waiting to get in when like those 3 people came in. So Sarah, you could have done it. You could have got there.
Oh, so close.
Emily tells us, you know, the Bays really slowed her down, as you two have both reiterated. And we get into the strategy talk this episode. And we talked about it in last week's recap where Sarah was mentioning a girls' alliance, and it was like, there are 7 people left. Like, it might be a little late to talk about this. Now's really late to talk about this. Kylie, what do you think about Sarah mentioning a women's alliance when they literally can't vote out the only man left in the game?
Yep, I know. I thought it was really interesting because it's like, okay, the girls in this season, like, how many were there? 5. And to make it like so far to the end and then like actually think about it at the point where it's like it can't happen anymore, it's just, I don't know, it's just interesting to me because like you always like mention it, and they did mention it early on, like a little bit, but they didn't, no one really clung to it. And then once Lowe's gone, it's just like, oh guys, I wish we had done that. Like, okay, well now like you can still technically be a girls' alliance, but you're going to be voting out a girl, and it sucks because it's not girl power. So I do think it's funny. I understand like rose-colored glasses, or what is it, like looking back, like, oh, this would have made so much sense. Because also it would be really cool to have an all-girl final 3. Just especially because it's like starting out with so few people, and then to make it to the end would have been awesome. So very regretful as a girl watching, but also like entertaining that they were still thinking about it when they like can't actually do it.
We then have Lydia, and this is one of the weirdest points of this episode to me. Lydia says, okay, do any of you have an idol? Like, just save us on wasting our votes. Like, let us know if you have an idol here. Erik, what do you think of Lydia's approach here?
I don't know. I just have so much respect for her with such a huge target on her back. I think she was honestly just doing anything she could to get by. Because she's had how many at this point? 3?
3.
It's like, I guess she was trying to say whatever she could to deflect the idea that she could have another one, but I don't know. I don't know if I would have said that myself, but what could she do really?
I also kind of feel, and I don't know that this is her thought at all, but to me, it's kind of a joke that she's letting everyone in on, like, oh, ha ha ha, if y'all have an idol, like obviously she knows she's the one that's had all the idols and everyone else knows it. And so she's kind of playing it nonchalantly, like, oh, does anybody else want to play? I don't know. Like, I just kind of feel like she's making it lighter than it actually is. Like, obviously she has a massive target on her back, and obviously like she's the one that makes sense to go here. And so for her to kind of lighten the situation a bit, which like I said, I don't know if that's what she was doing, but to me watching, it kind of felt like she was like making them not carry as much weight as they very much did in her game. So I kind of liked it. I thought it was interesting. I don't know that I would say something like that if I were her, but I would never be her because I would never find an idol or play one successfully. So
I think the most interesting thing about it is you have people thinking about idols then. And yes, Lydia has found many idols, so I could get that fear for voting for Lydia here. Even throughout the scramble, we don't really see Lydia's name come up that much.
Crazy.
Yeah, but it is Final 5, so it's the last time idols can be used, so it's understandable as to why, just based on the past. I don't know if I'd want to bring attention to an idol, though. Like, because then people are like, well, if Lydia's bringing it up, maybe that's because she doesn't have it, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's how I would think about it, but alas, she did not have another idol here. Already played.
Oh, that'd been insane.
Emily suggests to Vee and Lydia, let's vote out Sarah, because I think Jon's going to try to use voting Lydia out as his move, claim it as his own move to kind of add to his resume and put him over the top of everyone else. And then in confessional, right afterwards, Emily's like, yeah, I kind of want to go to the end with Jon and Sarah, but I just threw out Sarah's name, so I don't know how possible that is anymore. I don't know if any two scenes really sum up Emily's game better than these two back to back.
Yeah.
Emily's brilliant with the chaos she shows in the game, but it can come back to bite her and get a little sloppy when she does something like this. Sarah and Lydia then discuss how wild it is that Emily hasn't got any vote, or like hasn't gone home yet. She had a terrible performance in that first tribal council. They kind of talk about how Emily not going at that tribal council must be indicative of how good she was at orating, and that she's probably something you don't want in the final tribal council because she's probably good at talking your way out of things or into things based on that. Erik, how are you feeling about Emily at this point? Like, obviously we have hindsight, we know what's going to happen with this vote, but how do you feel Emily's played up to this point, and the fact that her name really hasn't been out there since that first vote?
Yeah. I'm just extremely impressed and entertained by Emily just throughout the entire season. Like you said, so much chaos. She's really just playing for herself and with herself. Like, she never had like solid alliances. She's so good at lying. Like, she's in a room telling somebody, oh, I'm going to vote this person. And then in her confessional, she says the exact opposite. And I'm like, wow, I totally believed what she had just said, but she was actually lying. But no, I think she's just been such an entertaining player to watch. I do think that it is hilarious that her fate, basically, she even says in the final tribal council, I know I'm skipping ahead, but her mantras that she was repeating to herself, she was literally repeating them to herself in breakout rooms alone. Those exact words, like be loyal, be a good ally, be honest, be loyal, be a good ally. And then she literally just slipped up at the end just because she wanted to add a little more like deviousness to her game. So I think it's hilarious, but I think she played really well. She's very charismatic. Everybody is saying this throughout the whole season, like, oh, she's hilarious. Oh, I love her personality. Oh, she's so good at speaking. Yet somehow nobody's talking about her or targeting her. So she played a very masterful game, I think.
Something about Emily that I didn't realize until watching it back. Like, I was a big fan of her watching her interview. I thought like she was very much my winner pick, like in the cast assessment. I was like obsessed with her. I thought she had like all the makings of a really great player if she could make it through the beginning, and somehow she did. But she's just so self-aware, but also she has such a good awareness of everyone else. And I do think there was a bit of a slip up, and that was kind of like her demise at the end, that like there was like a bit of a lack of like the awareness there of everyone else, but she had so much the whole game. It's like, I think back on Lex's thing, like where she caught that in the room where he switched when they were talking about the duos, like that was so masterful to me. Not like he did really well, and that was awesome. Like, props to Lex for being able to switch that, but more props to Emily for being able to catch that and like keep that. And she also used it really well. So I think that she's such an interesting player because she is so chaotic. And usually when someone brings so much chaos, they don't really have that much awareness. Like, it's not like a good combo there because it's like they're lacking that. And that's kind of where the chaos comes in. But it's like she does the chaos in a way that she knows it's going to be chaotic and she wants to. It's like she chooses to. She's not just a chaotic player just because she has to be. So I think that's interesting because I do think that kind of contributes to her, like her strengths there kind of contribute to her going at 5. Because she would have killed it at Final Tribal, I think. Like, she is a great talker. Her confessionals are incredible. Like, I was always just so entertained by her confessionals and by her thought process and stuff. So, interesting player for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Emily, I had the privilege of taking most of Emily's confessionals during the day. And it was great because I didn't have to say anything to her to prompt her to speak about anything. She would just spill her mind. And that it's so Emily to have her just do that. But it was fascinating seeing her thought process. It was like last episode, we saw that moment where she's like, everyone should be voting for me. Oh my God, they're voting for me. Like, seeing those moments live and like experiencing that from Emily, it was so fun the entire season. It was heartbreaking seeing her end up going at the end of this episode. But she kind of overplayed her hand with this with this round here.
Totally.
But before we get to that, Vee tells Jon and Emily, yeah, I'm voting Lydia. I can't beat Lydia. What are you talking about? And then Jon really jumps on this. He's like, yeah, I'm going to pump up Lydia here more and more. It's an interesting tactic. I'm not sure how useful it is to talk about how much of a threat someone else is in the game. Obviously, John's doing it here is like, if Lydia doesn't go this round, like we need to get her out next round type of thing. But it's so risky because you're also putting those ideas into the heads of people who might be going to the jury.
True.
And then if that's the last thoughts people are having going to the jury, you might be losing your own jury votes from these people as you vote them out of the game. Lydia then joins the room with Emily, Jon, and Vee talking about that, and just ask straight up where Jon's head's at as the immunity holder. Where's your head's at? And Jon just tells Lydia, "Yeah, I'm probably voting you." Kylie, what do you think about that?
This round, or this part of the round, was so interesting to me because I really liked Lydia's approach. She was just like, "Tell me, like, what are you thinking?" And Jon, which once again, Jon being honest, like, what is happening? I don't know. I think like that would not be my first thought to just do that. I don't hate it, but like, I don't understand it necessarily, like, I think when you're in this deep into a mini, like for me, which Jon has some experience here, like he's played in some other orgs, but for me, when you're at the final 5 in a mini, you're just like trying to get through it once again. He obviously already has immunity, so he can, but it's like you're trying to have that foresight of like who you want to sit next to, but you also, like you just said, are considering who you're putting on the jury. And so, maybe he thought, like, being honest, she's going to go to the jury. Like he thought everyone else was on that side, that she's going to appreciate that. And she did appreciate it. So like, it didn't end up happening in that round, but like, I think that was probably his thought process, which I understand. I don't think that would really be my like tactic there. But maybe based on like his conversations with Lydia in the past, like he thought that would be something that she would really appreciate. So I assume it's jury management, but I don't know. It was an interesting move for sure.
Well, speaking of Lydia's response to this, we don't really see Lydia's response to it. It's still weird because Sarah's the only one on that room, and based on contract, you can kind of figure out she's unconventional at this point. And the fact that Jon's just not willing to put out Sarah's name there at all, and just say Lydia, is risky, especially because it is Final 5, and there could still be idols in play. But it's also Final 5, and that would mean the last time to play idols, so that will be played no matter what. So I guess there's no harm in telling the truth here. I think it's a respect thing from Jon. I think Jon views it as I am telling you this because I respect you as a player, and I want you to feel that way too. But Lydia, she's in a tough spot here for the next 2 votes to make it to Final Tribal Council. Which yes, Lydia, you are. But prove us you can get there, because then, wow, if you could actually get to the end after the game you've already played, masterful, absolutely masterful. And makes a fantastic move here because she pitches to Emily, "Hey, I'm pretty sure you beat me. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure you beat me. And wouldn't it be more fun if the two of us are sitting in Final Tribal?" And this, to me, just tells you how much Lydia understands Emily at this point, because appealing to Emily's sense of fun is exactly how you get her here.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting because like when I was watching it, I was like, oh my gosh, if she told me that, like that would mean nothing to me. Like I would be like, no, that's not more fun. Like that's less fun, dude. Like what? But like you said, like her understanding Emily is so interesting because it's like, I'm not Emily, you're not Emily. Like we don't have to think that that's a good move. It's like understanding how to get into Emily's mind and be like, oh yeah, that is a good idea. Like that is so impressive, especially in a mini. Like I can't stress it enough. It's like you've only played with these people for a handful of hours, and like to be able to do that is just so impressive.
Everything she did the whole day, like these games are so fast paced. It's so hard to keep up with the numbers and like think strategically, and everything, like every thought process, every idea that she had was just like strategic gold. I was just like, wow, on her feet in every moment. She figured out at least 2 or 3 good methods to try and like throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And I was just so impressed.
Sarah then has this confession. She has her first of many kind of goat conversations here, where she feels like she's a goat. She's just being taken to the slaughter. And she's like, I think I'm getting to the end at this point, but I don't know if I can win. And she's a little disappointed by it. She's discouraged. And she talks to Jon about it. And in this conversation, she's also mentioning how good Emily is. I really like what Sarah's doing here. She thinks she's a goat. And she has not had this flashy game like everyone else has. But she's been on the right side of the votes a lot. And she has played this really subtle game. I wouldn't even go as far to say it's like an under the radar game, which will be something we discuss a lot when we get to the finale. But it's this subtle game where she's in power and she says a lot of things that make people realize things a lot. And I don't think Sarah got enough credit for that.
Yeah.
And how much she's contributing to these votes just by simply suggesting names and putting things out there into the world. It's so important in these minis because they are so fast-paced to just get ideas out there so that people can think about them. And I feel like Sarah did that really well this season, and it's just really hard to show that in an edit.
Yeah.
I completely agree. She was doing it from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I just love that she's like brand new to these games. She's clearly never played one before, but she was never afraid to, she's like, no one's giving a name, I'll give a name. But her approach is just so, like you said, it's not under the radar, but it's not like out front either, like out in the front, in the forefront. Like everybody likes her. She's disarming. She's self-deprecating. She's so genuine and likable, but she's not doing nothing. She's, like you said, she was on the right side of the votes throughout most of the season. And just like Lydia said during Final Tribal, I think that's exactly right. Is she was thinking like Sophie Clark. Like sometimes not making a big move is the right move. And I mean, she got herself all the way to the end. So
yeah, it's hard to win if you're not sitting there, right?
Someone say impossible.
Yeah. Some might say it's hard to get to win when you are sitting there too, but that's
I would say that.
So at this point, we do get Vee talking about, I actually really want to blindside Emily this round, and she thinks people are leaning that way. I really showed game awareness from Vee, and I can't speak highly enough of what Vee does here, of talking to Sarah and being like, hey, Emily's talking about getting you out because she thinks it weakens Jon. And it makes it so that Jon has less of something to stand on at Final Tribal Council. And Lydia then joins that, or is in that room. And then we get, I guess Jon was in that room with his camera off.
What was that?
We don't know either. We were curious.
I don't know. That. Just so everyone, all the viewers,
I've heard everything.
Yeah.
I know
just so all the viewers know, production records with high video participants on Zoom. So if someone's in the room without their camera, you can't tell from production standpoint. So I guess Jon was there and he heard everything. Sure, fine.
I heard the whole thing, totally on board. I'm like, whoa, he's there.
Yeah. But this is huge. Like, I know Jon's thinking, Jon knows not to go against the majority here, but Vee simply saying that Emily put Sarah's name out, which we do find out at Final Tribal Council was not Emily's intention at all this round. It's huge. It does show a game where it shows the ability to just find something and put it out there, right? And Emily even had mentioned earlier that she was kind of worried that putting Sarah's name up there would harm her chances of getting to the end. And she was right, because we get to Tribal Council and, there's talks about weighing options, preparing for the final Tribal Council and everything like that. We get to the vote and Emily's voted out 4-1 with Lydia getting that other vote there. I
want to give credit to Sarah, though, as well for this.
Yeah.
Obviously, Vee was the one to go and share that information, but Sarah, for I feel like the last 4 episodes, she's been, like you said earlier, she's doing it in a way where it sounds like it's complimenting, and she's like, oh, she's so charismatic. Emily's so enjoyable to talk to, and she's so good at speaking, but she's been planting seeds for a while. So I think she very much set up this move over time.
And you see her pick her final three, which I think is interesting. Like she literally says in a confessional, like my ideal final three is me with Vee and Jon.
Yeah.
Spoiler. That's what happens. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a great move on both parts. Also, it's like give credit to Lydia too. She successfully did the anyone but me. Like she made it through. Like I think this round is just really interesting. Like Emily makes sense to me to go as fifth place. Like she would be awesome in the finals. But also like you got to get her out, but there had to be a reason to get her out. It was like she had enough loyalty there. And she wasn't the biggest target next to Lydia. So it was like you had to figure out a way to do it. And Vee and Sarah both, I think, figured it out. But yeah, great move by Vee and good job by Sarah as well.
Yes, there was a good move from Sarah. She pinned Emily so correctly, like to a T. I don't know if this is right, but this is my impression of her, and it was literally spot on. I'm like, that is awareness right there.
Yeah, and Vee also has a moment where she's talking to a couple of people, and she mentions the fact that Lydia really sucks at challenges. So it's actually probably better to get someone not Lydia out here because it's probably easier to get Lydia out at Final Four. Yeah, it's a subtle thing. It's her protecting an ally, but I also think it plays into this idea that Emily had proposed earlier in the round, where voting Lydia out here makes it look like it's Jon's move. And that's a game awareness from Emily and from everyone else on the cast realizing that it's huge, because being able to claim you're the person who got Lydia out is a huge thing for the jury to consider.
Yep.
So let's get into this finale.
Finale! Woo!
We get straight into Final Four, and for you loyal DCP viewers, you were expecting a Millsip, but no, we're changing things up. This time we have the last straw. So in this challenge, the contestants had to hold a straw from at least halfway down, and they would stack alternating dice and cards until they had 4 dice stacked, and then they had to hold it for 5 seconds. Seems way easier than it is, right, Kylie?
Well, you know what, actually, I have a little story about this challenge. So when we tested these challenges like we talked about, but then I filmed the little demo videos. I got it on the first try of my demo video, and McKenna Feeney was like, keep going, see how many you could get. So I actually would have won that if we had that in my season. So
confirmed, you did get it on the first try. I love the little snips like this. You're like so excited.
Well, because the reason why I was so excited was because when we tested it the first time, I never got it. Like, couldn't even So it is really freaking hard, but it is doable. Yeah.
Yeah, it cannot be understated how difficult it is to line up your dice when there's just this giant playing card on top of them. Because lining up the dice is absolutely the most important part of this entire thing. When we originally brainstormed the idea for the challenge, we had them going another die, and in testing, people just couldn't do it. So we're like, okay, we've got to take it down one. And then Kylie kills it on the first try when they're recording these videos. And McKenna's like, do we have to increase it again? And we're like, no, last challenge of the day. We need to keep it short.
I just got lucky. But Vee literally freaking kills it. I was like, dude, take my throne. Like, that was awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't her first attempt. We did see her stack fall once. But yeah.
I'll keep the throne then.
He kills it, wins a very pivotal immunity, securing herself a spot at Final Tribal Council and giving her an awful lot of power here.
Yeah, we'll get to it, I guess, like when we talk about Vee's game overall, because we haven't talked about her a ton yet in this recap. But the fact that she wins this is so awesome, because I think it just like her game is really interesting. And like I said, we'll talk about it later, but like this is a big point as well to have that power, but also just have an immunity win. Like that's awesome. A lot of people can't do that. And so for her to have that on her resume, even though she forgets it in Final Tribal, to have it is really awesome.
So we get there. We have Vee happy she's won this an immunity necklace because she does think it's good for her resume. Lydia talks about she's just happy that this is the last challenge. She was really worried we were going to a final 2. She's like, it's been like 13 hours at this point. Like, let's chill. Good.
Fair.
Last challenge. We don't have to worry about anything else. Jon here once again says that he feels that it's either him or Lydia winning. Jon's really confident in his game, which is, I think, a reasonable way for Jon to read with his name kind of being out there the last couple of rounds. It's really hard to evaluate Jon's game here because it does seem like the people who were this far into the game were fearful of his ability to win. But then when we get to Final Tribal Council, it just doesn't seem to pan out. And maybe it's because like there's this fear of like the rest of the Tugela 4 voting for him there. Which is another compelling reason to keep Sarah in for the Final Tribal Council if it's just taking a vote away from Jon. But yeah,
I think it's understandable for him to be pretty confident in his game, and especially if you're Vee or Sarah, it's like Lydia and Jon have been targets from the merge essentially and multiple times throughout. So like a lot of times when you're in a mini, it's like that's what you can go off of because that gives you awareness of the jury, even if it's not actually accurate. It's just like that's kind of all you can tell. So I think it makes sense for him to be pretty confident, and it also makes sense for them to like look at him as a threat as well. But going up against Lydia, it's like you kind of got to figure out which one you think is a bigger threat.
Yeah, so Jon pitches here to Lydia after sitting in confessional. We have two options. We either go head-to-head this round or we go head-to-head at Final Tribal Council. One of the two. I'm pretty sure Lydia would have hoped it was Final Tribal Council, but that's besides the point. Vee and Sarah are talking, and Sarah mentions she wants all girls again, because that'd be sweet. And I agree. That would be awesome to see.
It would be really sweet.
But Vee, right away, is just like, we can't sit beside Lydia. We're not winning that if we sit beside her. And then we get this interesting conversation, and I want both of your guys' opinions on this. Sarah tells Lydia and Vee about the idol nullifier. Now, there's no way for her to substantiate the fact that this idol nullifier exists. She's admitting misusing this advantage that she had. Erik, what do you think? Is it a smart idea for Sarah to mention it now? Should she have saved it for Final Tribal Council to mention it there? As someone who had an advantage that they did not play, please, like, enlighten us. What's the thought process with this here?
Yeah, so the approach I took was like, let's drop the bomb at Tribal Council, shock everyone, and try to like make it a big flashy surprise that could like add to my resume. But I actually like what Sarah did, revealing it to them, and she kind of freely offers up the information. But I think she's struggling with the fact that she's like undervaluing her own game, and she's not giving herself enough credit. But then she's like talking herself into like, oh, I found an advantage. Like that's something. And I think it's good that she told them. It does substantiate the fact that she found it earlier. I feel like if she just brought it up for the first time at Final Tribal, it wouldn't have gone over well. I don't know why. I just think they would have just like steamrolled her, the jury. But I don't know.
I mean, keep in mind, she also has Austin on the jury already, who was already aware of the advantage and could have been talking her up in the jury already.
True.
True. Good point.
So I don't know if this really does anything for Sarah here. If anything, it might just kind of convince people, okay, well, she has something to talk about, but it's still not kind of on par with what we're talking about. And the fact that she's admitting this here might mean we can kind of take credit for things that she did that we also took part in, which we do see happen. Yep. Jon pitches Lydia to Vee here. I mean, it makes sense. But as he especially mentions, like, Vee, this will individualize your game. Because right now, people view you and Lydia as a duo. And all of your moves are associated with Lydia at this point. What do you guys think about this like idea of duos and like whether or not it diminishes your game? Kylie, I mean, you two were a duo.
I was just gonna say we don't know anything about being.
So Kylie, what do you think? Do you think sitting there with someone you've worked with the entire time who made similar moves to you the entire time diminishes your game at all, or does it just prevent a differentiation in your game?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the game. Like, I say Vee and Lydia were together for a while. If Vee sits next to Lydia, it's like so obvious what Lydia did that Vee didn't do. for other duos, like, I mean, there were so many throughout the season that they talked about. I did find it interesting, just like overall, that there were so many duos that they spoke about. Coming from our season where it was like not obvious and like not everyone even knew that we were a duo. So I don't know. I think it always just depends. Like, I do think there's validity there about being concerned sitting next to someone that has a similar game as you. Like, I was definitely concerned sitting next to Erik and Elena's both, but also like, I thought that Erik's game had so many differentiators than mine that like, it didn't really matter. And so like, I don't know. You just have to make the decision that like with the information that you have. And then for instance, in our situations, like I didn't even know about Erik's legacy advantage. So like, had I known that, maybe it could have been a similar thing to like Vee knowing all of the idol plays from Lydia, and then it would be a different situation. So I don't know. It definitely just depends. I think that there's a valid argument on each side, and you just have to like, if you're in that position trying to decide like who you want to sit next to, you just have to use the information that you have. And also like give yourself enough credit. Like we were just talking about with Sarah, it's like, it's hard to tell in a mini really what you've done and like what stacks up against the other people. And so especially if you are in a duo per se, you have to like really think through like what you've done, but that's so hard because there's like no time to think through it. So yeah, all of that long answer to say, it just depends in my opinion.
Erik, what do you think?
No, I agree with everything that Kylie just said. I don't have a lot to add, but what I did want to say was I remember watching this as it was happening and then watching it back too. I was a little nervous for Jon that like he was selling it too hard. And I was like, I don't think he even needs to do this. Like, I think what if Vee is like, I think I'm gonna change my mind. Like, I think he was kind of like explaining to her what she already knows. And he was explaining it well, but I don't know. I was nervous in the moment. But I'm glad it worked out for him.
So Jon, as you said, in his oversell mentions that him and Sarah have been working together, and you know, Vee agrees. Like Lydia and her have been working together and stuff. So she probably should vote out Lydia here to differentiate herself. Lydia pitches the all women's final tribal council that we saw Sarah mention already, and Lydia does a very subtle thing here, where she did it a couple episodes ago where she mentioned that she always gets near the end and then her ally, like her closest ally, flips on her. And this is so smart from Lydia. It shows Lydia understanding of Vee, how Vee is a very compassionate person. It does not work. Vee still makes the cutthroat move here and ends up voting Lydia out. But again, Lydia just like clocking exactly what needs to be said to give herself a chance.
Yeah. So impressive. That's so cool. And I do wonder how much, so we see like later, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but Vee crying when Lydia's talking. And it's like, I wonder how much of that, like maybe Lydia saying something like that also played into the emotions that Vee was feeling. It's like she can make the move, but also like she still felt that for her. So such a, like, yeah, Lydia's just so good. Very impressive.
Sarah's feeling safe because she's like, it should be Lydia or Jon. Vee's already said she wants me to go to sit at the end with her. So Sarah's feeling good. Vee once again reiterates that she wants to take Sarah and isn't sure if she's going to force fire or not. Now, from Vee herself, she has posted about this that she wasn't actually going to force fire, but like she knows that like some juries respect the sending people to fire, like giving them a chance to fight for it, but it's definitely not the right move here. I think forcing fire in a situation where you're not involved with fire just gives an option for someone to claim that as a resume move themselves. I imagine like if there's no scenario where I think fire works out for Vee here, because either Lydia wins and then you're sitting with Lydia at the final tribal council, or Jon wins, he gets the move against Lydia, which is what you tried to prevent by voting out Emily last round anyways. And Jon also gets to doesn't matter how things actually broke down, Jon can claim he convinced you to vote Lydia or to force fire here. Yeah. So I don't think there was a situation where it made sense for fire here personally.
It would also be taking away from her amazing final
exactly
challenge win. Like he would have the final challenge win.
Exactly.
That was the last thing that everyone saw. So yeah, totally agree.
So then we get to tribal council. Final tribal council. That's coming later. We get to tribal council, and there's a discussion around how you determine who to vote for here. It's a tough one. The biggest thing, we have Lydia kind of make her pitch, and she believes that she deserves to be in the end with her gameplay and everything, and that all four of them do deserve to be in the end, and she hopes her relationships, can get her through to the end. Jon takes a little more aggressive approach, talks about how great Lydia's game is. Lydia counter pitches and says, no, whoa here. Like you're giving me a lot of credit for things that I didn't actually do. Everyone should just play their own game. There's an important phrase coming up later. And we get to the results. It is Lydia 3 votes to her, 1 vote for Jon. Lydia is the last member of her jury. That takes us into Final Tribal Council. So I'm just going to summarize Final Tribal Council pretty quickly here. Just kind of talk about like the bigger ideas that everyone had. Jon, so we start with our opening statements. They are given just a minute or two to summarize their game. Jon spends a lot of it apologizing.
Mm-hmm.
He immediately apologizes to Lydia and to Emily. And it's just, I don't know. I don't like this approach. There's a joke in the reunion for Exile Island where they open the floor to talking. The first thing I do is apologize to Zucker for not playing my idol for him. And there's a joke, like, of course the Canadians apologizing. In final, like, I'm not doing that in front of a jury. When you're doing that in front of a jury, like, it's not claiming your game. And I think it's really interesting because Jon apologizes and Vee apologizes, but I feel like they apologize in 2 very different ways, where Jon apologizes and then explains what happens. Vee explains what happens and then kind of truncates it, chunks it off, and then apologizes separately afterwards. And I think that approach is just so much grander than what Jon does here. In his opening statement, he admits that Vee orchestrated the Emily boot and like gives Vee a lot of credit here. And he admits to his vote for Sarah at the Lex boot. These are kind of the big things he talks about in his opening statement. Sarah talks about how great her social game was. She compliments everyone on the jury. She takes a different approach. Whereas Jon and Vee take this apologetic approach, Sarah takes a complimentary approach where she talks about the jury and their strengths. And then she says that Lydia convinced her at the last tribal council when she said, play your game, to vote Lydia out. I think that's fantastic. I think it's a great move by Sarah to latch onto that statement. And because the jury's already seen it happen, it's a fantastic thing to be like, I am playing my own game here. Because Sarah has spent a lot of this game talking about how she was a trio with Austin and Jon. She talked about how frustrated she was that nobody else said she was in a trio with Austin and Jon. Sarah, you should have pushed that a little bit more at Final Tribal Council, I think, because nobody noticed. Mm-hmm. And then Vee talks about playing from the bottom. It's Vee's big pitch. She feels that the social game was very strong. She knew her... She says social game. I think she means more her awareness of the game and her game awareness, because she's talking about knowing who the power players are and knowing how the flow of information is working. She acknowledges her faults, especially being loyal and how loyal she has been. It's kind of hard. Loyal, I feel like loyal is just this trigger word that makes people respect it being loyal no matter what. I mean, we see it a lot, obviously, with like old school Survivor and everything. And as we move to the new school, like it's become less and less of a big deal. But being loyal, it's hard to fault someone with being loyal. And then, like I said, she also apologizes. Kylie, what do you think of these opening pitches?
Okay, so I thought Vee's was really, really good. I was very moved by hers. I think the way that she moved through the different levels of her game was just so impressive. It was like, especially as someone that maybe your game, okay, you can tell that she's an underdog, but maybe you don't see like all the other stuff that she did. She articulated it so well and also brought in the compassion. Like, she just has this way of speaking that like people want to listen and people are like emotionally tied to what she's saying, which is just such a gift. And like, it's how she is as a person, but it's like to be able to do that at Final Tribal as well, when she has had a really hard road. It's like she did fight from the bottom a lot. So I was just really impressed as someone that sat in a final at a mini and like did not know what to say. Like, she had only played one game before this too. So it's not even like she has this massive amount of experience coming in. So I was just blown away by Vee. Sarah's I thought was really good as well. Like, I thought that she encompassed a good amount. Like, I would say like 40 to 50% of her game. Once again, not really giving herself enough credit in some of the areas that she could have hammered in. It's like, maybe she could have embellished a bit more, I guess, which is coming from someone who didn't embellish at all. So I like, as the caveat there, I'm not like knocking it, but it's just like she could have. Jon's lost me. Like, I was definitely rooting for Jon. He was on my fantasy team. I thought like he did play a really good game and I was impressed by it. But which it is the end of the day. And I personally have a really like short attention span. But when we were watching this live, I like didn't have a ton of takeaways from his opening statement. Watching it back, I understood. I agree. Like, the tactic of apologizing at the beginning, it's like you either love that or hate that. And so it's kind of polarizing. So I don't know that that's the best approach just in general, whether or not like you're someone that respects it. So all in all, like, I thought they were all decently good. But Vee far and away had the best one, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
Before Erik comments
masterful.
on it, before Erik goes into more detail here, I do want to mention Jon's opening statement was actually a lot longer than we saw in the episode. We had to cut it for time because he kind of repeated himself a lot. But I think that was also a big thing with Jon's statement is it felt long. And maybe it was a disadvantage of going first. You mentioned Sarah not claiming things. I think Jon giving Vee credit for the Emily move there made it a little harder for Sarah to claim it. But Erik, give us your thoughts on these opening statements.
Yeah, no, I remember as it was happening live, Jon's was pretty long. But so to me, Jon's opening statement didn't feel like an opening statement. It felt more like, all right, I want to get this idea out there. I need to say this thing to this person. I need to say this thing to that person. Then boom, I've like wrapped a bow on it. Like, he just needed to get these things out there and get them said and get them done. It was very disjointed. But whereas Vee was like the exact opposite. She's like, I'm going to start opening up broadly about my game. I'll get into specifics later. And it was just very organized. It was like she has experience speaking. Like, she has to. Like, it was just so well done. And I think another really big thing about Vee's Final Tribal is that she has this way of like narrating things like with metaphors and like telling an actual story. Like the whole court jester metaphor was so good. Like, the other thing that I thought was really great about Vee was she's really good at showing that she understands the game and she understands the strategy. Like, even though her hands were tied throughout the season, her hands were tied because she was struggling on the bottom and she was never in the numbers. She was on the wrong side of the balls many times, but in the way she's articulating her game, she's showing that she's very strategic and she understands the correct way to play, even if she may not have throughout the season, which I think gives her a lot of merit with the jury.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. So let's get into these jury questions. I'm just going to read them off quickly, kind of like touch on the points they make. If you two have anything you want to chime in on what was happening in Final Tribal Council at the time, just let me know. So Luke starts us off as our guardian of Ponderosa. And he asked, who did you know in this org? And, what research did you do about this game beforehand? Jon, of course, admits to knowing Emily and Lee. He uses this time to articulate something which I think is really important, that Andrew, at the beginning of the game, had mentioned his org experience, and he noticed that people like Sarah were kind of jumping on him and being like, hey, that's not cool. I want to get these experienced people out of here. And he shut up about it, mentioned the fact that, he's played 5 games, but that he wasn't going to tell anyone because clearly people were targeting those people. Vee mentions the 1 game she's played previously, and Sarah mentioned she had no idea this world existed. Which, I mean, that was both of your huge experience as well. I mean, Erik, you at least had Brett from your Ricky Islands to tell you about it, but
I had no idea.
Yeah. So next we get to Ben. Ben asks what their missed opportunity was in the game. Sarah says not using the nullifier. She takes this opportunity to mention the fact that she got disadvantage. Jon says not solidifying an alliance, which is an interesting take because he's sitting at the end. But he says not solidifying an alliance and also had a very strong alliance.
Yeah, what? I have no thoughts. My thoughts are just what?
Vee said not taking advantage of the time to form stronger bonds with Lex, Ben, and Lowe. And I think that's a really good approach here because...
Yeah, like pointing out who exactly, so good.
We get to Austin's questions. Context in the application forms, there was a question of who do you want to play your game like and who do you think you'll play like. So Austin asks, who did you end up playing like? Like, well, who did you think you were going to play like and who did you end up playing like? Vee says she wanted to play like Jeremy, thought she would play like Sugar, felt like in the end she played a combination game, kind of used the meat shield strategy, but was still in that Sugar territory. Sarah feels like she kind of played like Wu, second fiddle, like keeping with the strong lines, going right into the end and not really differentiating herself. And Jon says he wanted to play like Parvati, which does not go over well with someone later in this final tribal council. Lowe asked, what role did I play in your game? I love this question. I think this is a great jury question because I think as a juror, you're allowed to be a little conceited here and you're allowed to base your opinion based on how people are able to navigate this question. Vee uses this as an opportunity to parlay that she's also a member of the Bad Bitch Book Club. And she wanted to work together, but, Lowe leaving let Vee be the under the radar player to get to the end. That Lowe was playing the game that Vee wanted to play the entire time, and having her gone allowed her to fall into that place. Jon wanted to work with Lowe, especially after she didn't go after him at the merge. She never threw out his name at the merge. He thought that was a big deal. And then Sarah talks about believing absolutely everything Lowe told her. That like Lowe would say she's voting for someone, and Sarah would just be like, yeah, like, okay, I think that's exactly what you're doing, Lowe. And but Sarah also mentions the fact that she brought up Lowe's name quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Lex's question is, what moment changed your trajectory in the game? So what moment got you to the final three? How did you get here? Jon says it was the Lifelines challenge. That was the one that he downplayed his challenge ability at, specifically did not sink any balls until he had a shot against him, then retaliated that shot and then kept missing until we got towards the end of the challenge because it tempered his threat level, he said. And he took that as a moment to kind of take a back seat, let other people kind of drive the boat for a little while. Vee says it was her day one alliance with Lydia, that it just helped carry her through the game, and the Emily boot was a massive move for her. And then Sarah says, there's no specific moment. I think it's more focused on my adaptability and the fact that I was willing to move a lot and just go with the flow. And we get to Emily. And I cut some of what Emily said, and I kind of added back. But Emily tells Sarah that her game wasn't just wasn't there. Emily gets a little harsh here on Sarah. She's also a little harsh on Vee. Is like, where's the proof of the pudding? Like, show us you actually did something. And she wants Jon to talk about a social game because she feels like he didn't really have one. Emily, I'm going to be honest, Emily kind of took the position that I would take in a final tribal council.
Yeah, totally what you
hard facts.
There's always one.
Yeah, which I appreciate. Emily got a little harsher than I would, but that's fine. Vee brings up being on the right side and the wrong side of the votes and how like it does not matter. I know for a fact Vee does in fact not believe the statement to be true, but had to kind of claim it because she was on the wrong side of the vote so many times. And that being loyal kept her on the wrong side of the votes. So she again emphasizes her loyalty here, which again, like I said, I think it's a buzzword that like you can't really fault someone for. Jon tried to have a fun time in group calls, and that was the moments where he was really trying to work on his social game, was rather than because it's not mini and you don't have as much time to be one-on-one, he really focused on trying to have fun in the group setting. And Sarah claps back at Emily. Sarah just says, Emily, you showed this card saying, be loyal and be a good ally. I didn't think you were ever loyal. I think I played the loyal game you wanted to play. Sarah, kudos to you. But this is fantastic. Anyone who knows me personally knows that if someone claps back at a final tribal council, like, you pretty much get my vote guaranteed. So seeing Sarah do this, mad respect. So much respect for Sarah in this position. And then we get to Lydia. And Lydia doesn't have any questions for anyone. Lydia just makes a couple statements about people. Says, Jon, how dare you compare yourself to Parvati? I think people do that all the time, and they're never right. Lydia compliments Sarah's social game, and that sometimes, and here makes that Sophie Clark comparison that you mentioned earlier, Kylie. That sometimes not making a move is the best move. It's something that's really underappreciated in Survivor, because not making a move is still making a move. It's just deciding what move to make. And Vee is just told how impressive her observing game was, and how she just observed people, and how she made Lydia cry happy tears.
And then Lydia made her cry lots of tears.
Lots. Yeah. we cut down a lot of the tears. There were a lot of tears in these last two, in like the final four and the final tribal council.
Yeah.
There were a lot of emotions flowing.
Which is so sweet. I love that. I love the emo part of it. It's so precious.
So we get to the vote, and we see Emily votes for Jon, says, I'm pretty sure you're going to win this. We see Lex loving Sarah's clapback, and Emily is like, you know what? I wasn't going to vote. I was going to vote for someone else here, but I have to give respect to what Sarah just did here. Good on you, Lex, because I would have done the same. And then we get our final vote tally, and Vee wins with 4 votes to Jon's 2 to Sarah's 1. No 0 finalists this time, Kylie.
Love it. So happy. I'm so happy for Sarah. Honestly, she did deserve a vote. So I love it. I remember like right after it happened, me and Erik were like, oh yeah, they all got votes. Woo. And like, it wasn't like, we actually are like really happy for them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm so happy she got a vote. I think her game was deserving of a vote. And just in general in Survivor, like I hate to see finalists with 0 votes. I feel like everybody that got to the end deserves a vote. It just makes me feel better. I feel like I'm just so glad they all got votes, because they were all very deserving. This whole cast was amazing. So
yeah. Well, I mean, with that, like, we're at the end of Trinity Falls here. What are your overall impressions of the season, cast? Anything we haven't covered today?
Oh my gosh. Okay, do you want to go, Erik, or do you want me to go?
I'll go. I think that this cast is just so special. I feel like they're all like basically super fans. They know the game so well, and they're all just such good sports. Like, there was no like toxicity, there was no like anger. It was all respect all around, and like I could tell as I was watching, I'm like, these people are going to be friends. Like, I love this. So I just think it was so fun to watch, and it was just very interesting strategically, because I feel like it was more just like flying by the seat of your pants in the moment, voting blocks, as opposed to like clear cut alliances throughout, which always makes it more fun because it's a lot more unpredictable.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it was such a fun season. Like, and for us to get to be involved on the production side of it was so cool. Like, we got to see it happen. And coming from a mini where, like you said, like neither one of us knew really a lot about these games at all a year ago. And so it's like now we got to see this happen. And I remember like, you know, watching Mike go first, like right after, like this was filmed right after Monte Carlo was aired. So like we had just watched Monte Carlo and we were all so pumped to see Mike play. We're like, he's going to thrive at a mini. And then he's the first out. And we're like, these people came to play. And like, maybe they didn't really know, I guess like who he was or like how he could play, but it's like starting out with such a big vote. And even just the sheer fact of like that first vote, like the person that really bombed the challenge made it through. It was like, wow, we're set up for like a really incredible season, and they did not disappoint. I agree. Like the cast is just amazing front to back. Like they're all really awesome. How can you like, even if at the very least the high points were like Lydia having 3 idols, like that's enough, insane. And to play correctly 2 of them, like just absolutely bonkers, honestly. Final 3, so amazing, totally deserving of a vote, all of them. Vee is like a really good winner. And I mean, her game is really interesting too. So it's like we have so many different games here to talk about between like the final 5, I would say. Really everyone, honestly, it's like even the beginning of the jury, like everyone did something. Everyone is fun to watch. And I agree with Erik. It's like the point of all of these games is to have fun. And so to watch people like enjoy it, have like the best day ever. Like I said before, like I'm quoted saying, playing Sahara Dunes is the best day of my life. Like it was so much fun. And to watch them have like maybe one of the best days of their life was so cool. And to watch it back, and a lot of them are like really good friends, and like they all have just really enjoyed it. So I think like all in all is a very successful season. And as a viewer, it was so enjoyable. So I'll go back and watch it for sure. It was a really good one.
Yeah, I can't speak highly enough about this cast. They were all absolutely phenomenal people. I think what best sums it up is Emily's exit confessional, actually, where she says she's never played an org before, where she just liked everyone. Mm-hmm. And she didn't have to push her votes based on like who she didn't like and things like that. And that every vote was hard because you actually like these people. Yeah, all of these people are fantastic friends. Like you could tell through the game. You tell with how emotional like Vee and Lydia get towards the end. These minis are long. Like, this was like 14-hour day. It was a long day. It was a very long day, especially with Final Tribal Council. That got very long. But to see this cast just come together, and like we as production, we can't do this without these incredible people applying to these games. Mm-hmm. So to have that wonderful connection between all of them, it means the world to me as a production member. I'm sure it means the world to both of you two as well. This community that Dynamic Character Productions brings together is so important to me, and this cast did absolutely everything to make this community even better. And we're so happy to have each and every one of you as part of our family. Mm-hmm. But with that, we're at the end of the season. But we got some MVP totals to break out here. But before we get to the totals, I need to know, Kylie, who was your MVP this week?
Okay, I just want to say, I think I prefaced my MVP in Monte Carlo with this too, but it's like, I take these seriously, okay? When I played, I wanted to know every week, I was like, when am I going to get an MVP point? So it is not a big deal, but it is fun. So I thought about this a lot, and with these 2 episodes, like, it's hard, honestly. Like, I think there's an argument for all of the final 5 to get an MVP point at the end. However, I really want to talk about Vee's game. So I am going to give my MVP to Vee, the winner, obviously. But I think like the reason that I would give it to her is not just because she wins. I think like her game is really interesting to me because it was not perfect and it was not dominant necessarily. I would not describe it as a dominant win, but I do think she's a really, really good winner. And I think it's very well-rounded, her game from start to finish. She was an underdog at a lot of points. So she does have that part of the story. But she also did have that immunity win, which is cool. And she did that when she needed it. And when she did have power, which albeit like she didn't have a lot of power throughout the game, it wasn't necessarily, her lack of power wasn't necessarily due to her like wrong moves. It was just circumstantial. So when she had power, she took control of it and she like used it in like good ways. I thought that really benefited her sitting at the end. And she did have that awareness. And then, I mean, like I said, I can't express enough like how impressive her final tribal was. And honestly, just like how, I wouldn't necessarily say her social game, but the way that she could read people and also like what Lydia said, but it's like understand what the people need and like what they want each individual. Was just really, really impressive. And I mean, yeah, I think had Lydia been at the end, like Lydia would beat Vee for sure, but she wasn't at the end. And it's like, you can only say like, okay, Vee really was the winner. And I think that she's a great winner. I think that coming in, Jon played a really good game too. Sarah played a good game. So I want to give them both kudos as well. But Vee just like played a really awesome game. And I think it's really impressive to win and to be like an admirable winner when it maybe wasn't the most like dominant, you know, like it's not the most cut and dry, like clear winning game, which in my book is kind of like a little bit better, honestly. It's like more interesting, and it's really cool that she still made it through. So that was really long, and I'm really sorry, but I just like wanted to like really express like I am impressed by her game. And I really enjoyed watching it. And I mean, I love listening to her talk. She should like write an audiobook or something, and I'll listen to it, or get a podcast. Okay, I'm done.
There you go. Vee, give us that podcast. Erik, who is your MVP?
So I've said it a lot during this recap, but I just have mad respect for Sarah. I'm going to give it to Sarah. I think she undersold herself. Like coming in, just like I knew no one, I knew nothing. I don't know what this world is. I'm just like, well, they found me. This sounds fun. But just from the beginning, you can tell everybody enjoyed talking to Sarah. Everybody felt good with Sarah. Everybody got good vibes from her. They're saying it in their confessionals. They're saying it to each other. Everyone the whole way through liked Sarah because she's just so genuine, authentic. Her social game was so strong. And yes, she wasn't making like big flashy moves, but she was always in the numbers because of her social game. And she was always getting the outcome that she wanted. So I just think, like, I can't say enough. I think that she's underrated, and I think that she did an excellent job.
Yeah, absolutely. Every single member of this final three deserves an MVP. Like, they're all so well-rounded. They came with these different games, and they just performed really well. And it shouldn't be understated because they all did exactly like their game feels so unique to them. Last week's audience vote yielded Emily as the MVP for her immunity win and forcing that Lex boot. So now I have to give an MVP. And while I think everyone in this final three deserves an MVP, I'm not going to give it to any of them. I'm going to give my last MVP to Lydia. Just not even being a name at Final Five is so impressive, especially after everything she's done, playing 3 idols, even just having that close connection with Vee, like knowing how to play on Emily to appeal to her sense of fun, knowing to appeal to Vee's emotions, and just mention like, yeah, I've had my closest ally vote me out before at this point. I think Lydia played exactly how she needed to get to the end. She comes up short here, but Lydia's game is just absolutely impressive. So I am giving the point to Lydia, which means that's it. We've given out all of our MVP points for the season. So let's get to some totals. So we have 3 people with 1 point. Those are Lo, Austin, and Sarah.
Incredible.
2 people with 2 points in Lex and Vee. Jon has 3 MVP points, which shakes us down. It was close. It was really close here. It's between Emily and Lydia. Emily received 4 MVP votes, and Lydia, with that last MVP I've given her, is the most valuable player for Trinity Falls with 5 points. Lydia, congratulations. Your game was excellent. Yeah, you know that. I'm giving you points all over the place. So you know how I feel about your game. Well deserved. Absolutely.
Amazing.
With that, that's it. That's the last recap for Trinity Falls. It's been an absolute delight having the ability to have all these fantastic guests, including Kylie and Erik here this week, to talk through all this game with everyone. Thank you, the viewers, for tuning in. We obviously can't do any of this without you. Thank you to this cast. You're all phenomenal people, and we are so excited to have you be a part of Dynamic Character Productions. Thank you to the rest of production who isn't here today. These games can't happen without you. We all know that. Big shout out and big thank you to McKenna and Alex, our 2 fantastic hosts this season. They just make this game so fun, and they put so much work into this. Special shout out to Greg, who wasn't able to join us day of for production, but put so much effort to the design of this game. And once again, thank you, the viewers. It's so important to us that you know we love you all. Thank you for tuning in. this might be the end of the recast, but we still have Trinity Falls content coming out this week. We have more exit interviews for you. We have the reunion, and you know what that means? We have a blooper reel. So tune in for the rest of the week. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Ring that bell for notifications so you know when that reunion comes out. So you know when those exit interviews come back. You can hear those thoughts of those final four and join the Facebook group. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Be a part of the DCP family, because you know what? Applications for our next game, they could be right around the corner.
Ooh.
Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful off season.
Life. Bye.